Every guest that comes on the show has to complete this sentence,
Oh, yeah.
Coxie. Life is ...
Life is an adventure. Make the most of it. Enjoy the ups and downs and all arounds, and just be grateful for what you got.
No one tells you what you're supposed to do.
Mason Cox is an outlier, a 211 centimetre, American-born Aussie rules footballer playing at the biggest sporting club in Australia. With strong values and equally strong opinions, he has not only overcome the odds, he has been a breath of fresh air in a sporting code crying out for some personalities. Mason, great to have you on the show.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.
Mate, the first question, you're born in Dallas, Texas. You went to Edward S. Senior High School. I just want to know, how the hell did you get here?
It's a long story. I'll give you a bit of a short synopsis of it. But I went to Edward S. Marcus High School, I think is the official name of it, in Flower Mount. And growing up, I played soccer. So I played soccer my whole kind of career growing up, from when I was a young kid until I was 18. My older brothers both played it. And just as the youngest brother of the family, you kind of idolize the older brothers. So I just kind of played and took after them, and was fortunate enough, got into it and got to a very high level there where we were playing in tournaments overseas and playing in some of the biggest tournaments in the world. And it was just kind of crazy. And then I realized I got to a point where I was maybe 17, 18. You realize, I guess the professional aspect of soccer was not going to probably be a possibility for myself. So went to school for engineering, mechanical engineering. Both the parents were mechanical engineers, so decided to kind of follow in their footsteps, and went to school at Oklahoma State. And from there, I started to play basketball. So I was about 6'8", 6'9" at the time, and I'd always kind of wanted to kind of get into it. But I had this massive growth spurt in my junior year of high school at 16, 17. Grew 6 inches in a summer, so I wasn't probably as coordinated back then to be able to get into basketball, but I went to university. All my friends played basketball, so I was kind of like, all right, I'll just start playing, just be the guy in the post, get rebounds, give it to someone else who can play basketball. And then I got better and better every single day. And then Oklahoma State men's basketball called up and asked if I would start being on their team as a walk-on. So pretty unique scenario. Like, they have private jets that fly them everywhere. Like, they have, dine in, they get, chefs and everything to do the cooking and all that jazz. So it is a very, there's a lot of money that goes into the programs, and it's a very high playing standard there. So that was a huge kind of opportunity for myself to get into that. And then I started playing towards the end of it, started playing some legitimate minutes, and AFL came knocking, which was like a random email off the wall of, hey, would you be interested in this thing called AFL? We're doing a combine in Los Angeles. Thought you might be interested, playing soccer and then playing basketball, and then you might be able to transfer over to another sport. So went to this combine in Los Angeles. Had to Google what it was. Never heard of it.
I thought so.
Totally ignorant to it. So Googled it. It was like AFL's biggest hits and stuff, and it was just like people getting knocked out left and right. And I was like, whoa, okay. Australia is kind of known to be a bit of tough, gritty kind of people, and that kind of epitomized it, I think, to a T. So I was interested. I was like, I've always been probably the most aggressive guy on teams and stuff, and probably, towed the line a bit on that and like going back and forth. And I guess for this sport, it was kind of one of those things where you had a bit of free reign to kind of, I guess, show how physical you were. So I was definitely interested. I said, you know what? I already had a job, ExxonMobil, with engineering, top, Fortune 500 company. Really good job going out of college. And I was like, worst case scenario, I'll just go back to that, which is a very good, plan B. So went to this combine, not expecting anything of it. Did really well, and there was a few different teams interested. And was fortunate enough to get flown out to Melbourne to kind of check out what AFL was in first person, because I'd no clue. I thought it was an Eastern European basketball league that might fall.
What did you think? What did you think when you first sort of saw it?
Oh, the first game I went to was in Geelong. It was North Melbourne versus Geelong. I'll never forget it. And I was with my brother. So my brother Nolan came out, and the first thing I'll never forget, we're sitting in Geelong, and like Geelong's song comes on as they're running out of the race, and it's like, we are Geelong, the greatest team of all. We just looked at each other, was like, this surely can't be a grown man's game. Like, this is like the most childish kind of anthem I've ever heard in my life. And there's these grown men, huge fellas just rolling out, ready to tackle each other, like singing along to this this child whimsical tune that was AFL. So it was just kind of crazy to us. But it was cool because there's like 30,000 people there. So we're like, oh, if there's that many people show up to a game, then this must be a legitimate league. You know, it was, I guess, a bit of for us to realize it was something that was proper and put in place and wasn't going to fold in a year or two. That was massive for us at the time.
When was the moment where you actually went, you know what, I'm going to have a go at this. I'm going to put all my chips on the table and just see if I can make something of it, because it just seems such a huge stretch to come from what you were doing, where you were living, to going, yeah, I'm going to have a go.
Yeah, it was a moment. It was at St Kilda Beach on our trip over for those 2 weeks. So we got like a kind of an all-in-one kind of experience of what AFL was. And in those 2 weeks, and we had one day, it was like really one afternoon off where we didn't have anything planned. And we went down to St Kilda Beach, my brother and I. I'll get the exact place in my head, would know exactly where we sat and everything else, and had this conversation. Probably one of the first conversations, legitimate conversation I had with my brother, a bit more in depth, you know, about life in general and everything else. And he told me one thing I'll never forget, and he said, a degree never expires. You can always go back and work a desk job no matter what you do, but an opportunity like this is a once in a lifetime thing that's not going to come knocking at 30, 40 years old. So I think whenever I heard that and talking to him about his kind of career in the business world and how he enjoyed it, but if there's an opportunity like this, he would take it tenfold. So I think talking to him, he just kind of got to the point where he was like, look, man, like, it's your decision at the end of the day, but my advice to you is to take it and run with it. And yeah, we knew before we left Melbourne, really, that essentially I was going to fly halfway across the world to go play a sport I'd never heard of in a place I'd barely even been. So yeah, it was kind of a daunting time in my life to have to accept that fate, I guess, of like just the unknowing of what your future was going to hold. But we got there in the end, and we've been fortunate enough now that it's kind of worked out.
There's a crazy bravery that comes with making that sort of decision. You've made that decision. Did you still think, you know what, this is a 1 in 1,000 shot, or did you have belief in yourself and thought, you know what, I think I'm going to back myself. I've got a good chance here. Where did you sort of sit on the pendulum?
Yeah, it was. I know it was a kind of a long shot. Like, it was having to teach yourself a whole new sport, like in a ball you've never seen before, and trying to learn how to kick handball and everything else skill wise. So I knew it was going to be a challenge, to say the least. Like, it was going to be a massive challenge for myself. And like growing up and everything else, I think one thing I've always kind of prided myself on is no matter how hard of a challenge, I've always decided to take it on. And this was just almost, you know, the extreme. It was kind of antagonizing of like, oh, how good is this? You know, to sit there and say, you know, I have this massive challenge in front of me, and now I can kind of have something to look forward to and something to strive to. And it was challenging when it came over. You know, I mean, you don't have any family here, you don't have any kind of friends group or anything. You're on your own in a place that is so far away from home. And the first 2-3 months were quite hard, but in a sense of like the way my mental like aspect to it kind of was, my mental kind of thinking was, all right, this is a challenge to do something that almost at the time no one else had done. No American born and bred had played an AFL game. So it was a chance to somewhat, I guess, create your own legacy, which was pretty cool that hadn't been done before, and to kind of somewhat create your own path in life that, you know, maybe someone else would be able to go down one day. And yeah, we've been fortunate enough now that I've been able to play, you know, AFL games, and wasn't the first American ever born and bred to play. Jason Holmes beat me by about 6 months, I think. But yeah, it's been amazing to still be a part of the whole system and still be going at this time.
So 2016, you make your debut, close to 100,000 at the MCG, Essendon, Anzac Day game, which is just an incredible spectacle, as we know. You're running up the race. You're running into that crowd. That's a long way from Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, I think it's about 9,500 miles or kilometers or something. But it was daunting. Getting the call up on that day, and it's a weird thing. I always look back and I always think of how amazing the day was, but also the fact that not only every time someone comes into a team, someone has to come out, but it was a guy who was literally going to go down in Collingwood Hall of Fame, probably Travis Cloak. Yep. A guy who was, you know, one of the best players in the team, won a grand final with the team in 2010, and was such a pivotal, you know, part of that club and program for a long time. And went in for him on Anzac Day of all days. And it was this crazy kind of nerve-wracking experience of walking onto the ground. And I've been to one Anzac Day before, but probably didn't quite understand, I think, the significance of the day until you do walk out with a team and you're sitting there on the field, and you kind of realize that the 100,000 are all looking at you and your team and you just kind of feel like all the eyes are on you on the day, and you kind of get that nervous feeling. But I think whenever I really kind of broke was I go, okay, the minute of silence, last post, and then they started playing the national anthems of New Zealand and Australia. And at the time, I didn't know a word of either one of them. So I was nervous as hell. And all of a sudden I looked kind of left, looked kind of right. And I was like, just kind of had a bit of a chuckle with myself of like how crazy after 2 years ago, not knowing what this sport is, now I'm on the biggest stage playing in front of 85, 90,000 people. How amazing has my life been? Like how fortunate am I, and how, I don't know, how like all those little things that had to happen for me to be able to end up here. And it was kind of a reward for effort to be able to experience that on my first game. And it's just something, I don't know, looking back now, it still kind of gives me chills just kind of be able to experience that.
I'm going to talk about just one other football performance, 2018 prelim. I mean, you're still learning the game, obviously. I mean, you came to the game so late, but that was a performance that just excited all AFL watchers. What you did on that particular evening was more than a cameo performance. It was dominant. Is that now a difficult benchmark to live up to, or has it given you a bit of a, I guess, opened up and shone a light on your potential?
I think I've always kind of, I don't know, some people might consider it cockiness, I don't know, but I think I've always been confident in what I've been able to produce in games. And I think on that day, everything just kind of worked out well. Like we had, we dominated in the midfield, which gave plenty of service to the forward line, which gave me plenty more opportunities to be able to have the statistics and the stat line that I did. So I think on the day, everything just kind of came together so well, and we played so well as a team, and that it kind of helped me in my story. Like I think if it was anyone else who had, had a different story and stuff that went through the same kind of process and was Australian born and everything else, it probably wouldn't have the same media that it did. But I think a lot of people probably at the time were putting me down, said, you shouldn't be playing. He didn't deserve the opportunity to be playing that prelim, et cetera, et cetera. And then the fact that it was so negative towards me, and then came out and played so well, and everyone had to pretty much swallow the words. It was kind of a shock factor to a lot of people, I think. And that's probably what made the story so big and so unique. But yeah, it was an amazing day going back to that 2018 prelim. And unfortunately, we didn't win the grand final the week after, because that would have probably made the whole story and whole experience, a dream experience. But that day was something I think that obviously will live on in infamy of my career and define my career at some points. But I think it also just kind of reminds myself whenever I think back to it that should be the benchmark that you should be striving to at least be able to go and be able to put out that kind of performance on a weekly basis.
You make mention there of the outside noise that always comes from the critics and the journos. Is that something that you use to fuel your performance, or is it something that you ignore?
I think it's tough to ignore. I don't think anyone would be able to ignore it, because I think going into games and stuff, going out of games, you kind of know how you played. You know whether or not it's good, bad, or ugly. For myself, I've always been my harshest critic. So, like, to see media and stuff jump on board, that's not really I don't really care about that as much. Like, obviously, it's kind of you just know it. It's already, I don't know, like you know if you're playing well or playing bad at the moment, or you're in a hot streak or in a bit of a lull. And there's no real need. I don't really care for the media's opinion too much, because it fluctuates so much from week to week that it kind of shows that there's no consistency of the way people think about things. And you get to the point where I think you realize Australian media, and this is not, I guess, having to dig at them by any means, but it is very overpopulated. I think there's a lot of people that have a lot of different opinions, and whenever one person has a differing opinion, everyone just jumps on board. So you just learn to, I guess, be able to control the controllables is the biggest thing. And I've learned throughout this whole experience is, that people can say whatever they want, people can think whatever they want, but at the end of the day, you're the one that can actually control the actions of what you do on a field. Like, no one else that says anything can control what you're able to perform to on a field. So I think at the end of the day, that's the way you got to look at it. Is you can't take in someone else's comments and everything and let it affect you on a personal basis, because at the end of the day, you're the one that's performing, not them. So you got to take everything you can with a grain of salt and then just go from there.
All right, Australian citizenship. I think you're a week away from having that. I think it's been approved, but it's about to get rubber stamped. Is that right? And was it a big decision for you to make?
Yeah, like I've finished all the different document stuff. It's just the getting sworn in. So obviously in these times, it's kind of unique. You can't have 50 people like usual and have everyone get sworn in and have that experience. So they're doing it online now. So they're kind of asking me if I'd be interested to do it online. So we're trying to go through the details of that, and then having media on board that are interested in it and stuff too, and trying to make sure it's all kosher. So A few things with that, yeah. But for myself, it's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. Like, you have to get permanent residency first, and then from that, you have to apply for citizenship after that. And it's a bit of a process and a lot of paperwork. So for me, it was kind of, I don't know, looking at the whole thing now, it's a bit of okay, you've moved your life half a world away. Now you're properly settled in, another country, and you have physical proof that you've been able to settle your life in another country. And to me, it's not necessarily, I think a lot of it's just saying, okay, like, now you're part of the culture and everything else. That's great. But this is like physical proof that I've had this whole amazing experience and been able to go through the ups and downs. And it's this, whether it's a passport or citizenship, plaque, whatever it is, it kind of represents my whole experience in one kind of item. And I think, and that's probably the biggest thing for me. Like, yeah, there's things that come with it, with taxes and all that other stuff, and then voting and all that jazz. But in a grand sense of things, it's probably more of, hey, this is like come full circle, and this is your adventure, and this is like kind of what you've become now. Is this, whether it's US and Australian citizen, you'll forever be linked to this country. And now you've got, a legit investment in it.
I think you're definitely linked now. It's a strong link. And I think it puts you in a very unique position maybe to answer this next question. Looking at Australians and Americans, right? I want you to tell me what is the best trait of Australians and then Americans? And then I want you to tell me the worst trait. Where can we improve? Because I reckon you're in a position where you can view both.
Oh, gosh, I'm not getting in trouble for this. I'll go the best traits. We'll go good news before bad. Best traits of Australians is their interpersonal skills. So I think Australians definitely look after each other. They have a bit of an idea of you work to live, not live to work. And that's probably the best way to describe Australians, I think. I tell people all the time, I think from the cafe culture of just sitting down, having a chat with someone, that doesn't exist in the US. The US is very go, very much. Try to get as much in as you can, and you don't really focus on, I guess, the relationships you have, where Australians are very aware of that. So most of that's probably the best thing about Australians. The best thing about Americans, best thing, that's a tough one, but I think Americans are just entertaining. I think that's probably the coolest thing about them. Whether it be, Hollywood, whether it be movies or TV shows, whatever it is, they kind of lead the industry in just entertaining people, whether it be sport and everything else, like individuals just like are followed throughout the US because they are so different from other people, and they show, I guess, their kind of passions and their excitement for things. And in Australia, it's kind of different. I think I'll go to the negative of Australia is the tall poppy syndrome. I think that's a big problem that Australians have, is they don't like other people's opinions. They like their own opinion more than trying to be swayed to another one. So that's kind of frustrating at times whenever you try to come up with a different idea that maybe not everyone agrees with, but they just tend to throw it out somewhat, or they tend to like bring someone down. You can look at stuff of Adam Goods. You can look at Liz Cambridge and all this other stuff that's going on. I think people just see someone being successful and they say, oh, well, because they're being successful, I can't support that. And it's like, you should be proud of that for some reason. I don't know why it is like that. Like, I think everyone kind of jumps on a bandwagon here a lot quicker than they probably should, and judges people without actually knowing them. So that's probably the whole tall poppy syndrome in Australia is probably the worst trait I'll say about Australians. And then Americans' worst trait, it probably ties into their best trait too, is they're kind of ignorant. They're a bit boastful to the point where they don't realize the seriousness of some situations, and they think the world kind of revolves around them. It's kind of this weird sense of a lot of people in Australia and America don't have a passport, do not travel outside of the US, and don't have any kind of experience of other cultures or anything else. So I think that's probably the most frustrating thing to me, is to try to connect on people's understanding in the US of like, there is things outside of the US. The US isn't everything and anything. Like, there's amazing things going on outside of just your borders. And that's a tough thing to try to describe to people. I think a lot of people just are so proud of the American culture, and America is the greatest thing that ever lived, that they kind of forget that there are some amazing things happening outside of their country.
I love that you've got an opinion. Don't ever lose that. There are... I
might get in trouble for that.
No, you'll be fine. There's some amazing leaders, and I want to talk American leaders over the last, let's say 6 to 12 months. I'm going to throw 3 names at you, and I just want you to give me your American opinion, because I think all 3 of these people have been... Well, they've all been incredible news for different reasons in the last sort of 6 to 12 months. We'll start with Kobe Bryant. Obviously, the sad passing of Kobe Bryant this year, but just a person that seems to have affected so many different people.
Yeah, I think with him, it's such a terrible thing. You look at how it's one of those things, you never know how much people affected other people until someone passes. I think like whenever someone passes unexpectedly, especially, then all of a sudden they get all this credit, all this kind of, oh man, like how good was he? He was such a great player, such a great person, and everything else. And it's like, man, I wish we would have been doing that while he was still here, like, and it's kind of a sad thing about Kobe, but there are some amazing stories that have come out of it. Like he was so invested in trying to get like the young players to be able to advance their game and really kind of investing back into the NBA as far as his knowledge and his sense of, I guess, of the game. And it was kind of cool. Like he was such a leader in so many different aspects. I mean, you can look at whenever he came to Australia, maybe a year, 6 months before his passing, and like how influential he was to so many people. Like whenever he passed, I couldn't tell you how many of my friends were posting, photos of it or of him meeting them or them meeting him or whatever it is. And like the whole experience of him coming here, he just inspired so many people, I think, throughout his career, that it was, to have it kind of happen like that so unexpectedly, and just have it taken away from you like that, and have that life that was so well lived and such a unique, experience for himself, just to not have any closure to it, I think was quite tough for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people that he was pretty close with are still struggling with it at the moment. And he was a leader in his own right. He was determined. He was confident. He was just an animal whenever it came to playing. Like he just, his work rate was just something that people talk about all the time. They say, oh yeah, Kobe, I tried to beat him to the gym. I got there 2 hours earlier and he was already there for 2 hours and was 4 hours earlier to practice and stuff. Like just crazy stories like that where the man just never slept, never stopped. It was just eat, breathe, and sleep basketball. And then whenever he retired, he got on to different things and, won an Oscar and all this other stuff. So it was just kind of this feel-good story of someone doing something amazing with their life that was just kind of taken away from us, I think, way too soon.
It's pretty incredible watching him also evolve as an athlete and a competitive beast, but then seeing Kobe, the family man, in the latter stages of his life, and just his absolute love of his kids, which just shone through every time that you saw him. I thought that was just such a powerful representation we don't often see from athletes for whatever reason. There's just not that family connection. It's not that visible, but I thought he really put that in front of a lot of people's face. It was very powerful.
I think a lot of people probably look at their family as their private life and they don't want that to be public.
Yep.
Which is understandable, but a man of that stature, like it's just, I mean, there's no stopping it really. And the fact that his daughter was getting into the basketball and was very good at it and was going to go to university and stuff probably increased the, amount of attention on that with Gigi and stuff. So it's sad, man. Like it is what it is now. Like, I mean, what's happened. There's nothing you can do to go back to change it, but he's an amazing person. He was so switched on too. I mean, like he spoke that many different languages, and he just was one guy that, everyone kind of thinks, oh, athletes are, jocks and they're not as smart, blah, blah, blah. But he kind of broke that barrier and was actually quite intelligent on and off the court.
I heard an amazing story yesterday about Kobe Bryant, obviously being multilingual, playing in an Olympics, and they're playing against Italy, and he'd honed up his Italian language skills prior to the game, so he could actually trash talk them in the right language. You talk about preparation. That's pretty outstanding. Another basketballer, well, probably the basketballer, The Last Dance has been obviously a hot documentary to be watching at the moment. Michael Jordan, his impact on, well, not just American culture, but worldwide culture. And have you been watching the documentary?
Yeah, I was up till, I think, 1:30 last night watching it. It's been unreal. Like, I think we're on episode 4 now. And it's been so cool to see like an insider's access to the team that was always known as the team. Like there's no one else that's ever compared to that Bulls team, and no one else that probably ever will. And the fact that they had media access to it and have not really released it until now. And they brought in, I think it's really cool they've brought in so many people that were involved. I mean, there's like 20 different people that are getting interviewed every single episode. It's insane. Like, and it's so cool to see it dive deeper into people's lives, like people's personal lives and what was going on. I think the Rodman episode was the last one that was up. And you talk about the stuff where he just all of a sudden goes and disappears for like 48 hours because he just needed something to get away from it all. It's phenomenal. Like, it's just insane. And you talk about leaders and stuff, and you talk about MJ and Phil Jackson and that, and there's no way that MJ, and you talk about MJ, said he wouldn't play if Phil Jackson was going to get fired, and it kind of shows to, I guess, how good and how much Michael realized that Phil Jackson made him better and made him the athlete that he was. And it's just so cool to see, like, he was such a different thinker, Phil, and the way he kind of looked at his players and stuff. He was probably one of the first coaches that properly invested in his players. A lot of coaches before that, were just like, all right, cool. You do this, run laps, blah, blah, blah. Like, he was actually invested and interested in their personal life and what made him tick and everything else. And he was probably one of the first ones, I think, to properly do that on that scale. And you can see the repeat rewards. And then you look at sport now, and it's almost like everyone's a bit like that. We go into the culture now. The Nathan Buckley and the Damien Hardwicks of AFL are known to be very personable with their players. And Phil Jackson was one of the first ones to do it. And I think Michael, he was like the Kobe. He was filthy, and if you didn't do the right thing, he'd get into you. But at the same time, I think people knew it was because he was such a competitive beast. That's what made him so good, is because he expected perfection every single time he went out there, and that's what he strived for. And he expected nothing less from his teammates. So there's this classic. I think I read something the other day. It was Kobe said there's like, oh, there's no I in team, and he says there's a me in that mother effer. And then it was Jordan was there's no I in team. He said no, but there's an I in win. And it just kind of shows to the testament of how much of a competitive beast each one of them was, and they're willing to do anything to get a win. And in that sport, it's kind of like that because you only have 5 guys on the floor for each team, so one person can make such a big difference, and there's a lot more, I guess, like that they can sway a game than like probably AFL where there's 18 guys on the field, and it's like, all right, well, all 18 of those have to come together. It can't just be one guy you build around and all of a sudden you're just going to be successful. You need to have a proper like team attitude of the whole thing. Where in the NBA and like sports where there's not as many people, I think you can have those superstars and then have players that are not maybe at that level that are just supporting acts to them and still be successful.
So from 2 iconic basketballers that really transcended their sport, let's go to the leader of the country, Donald Trump. And I don't know the political persuasion. So how do you feel as an American as with him as your leader?
It's frustrating. It's kind of like I talked about before of how people in the U.S. don't look at perspectives outside of the U.S., right? And I don't think people realize how embarrassing it is from an outside perspective of what gets played on news channels around the world, and what people think of him from looking from the outside looking in. And it is kind of funny now, like whenever I was living in the States, you would never kind of hear the bad mouthing of people and stuff, and political, jobs and stuff like you do in Australia and around the world. And then I kind of got out of it, and I realized that the truth is kind of played outside of the US, but there's kind of a bit of a media storyline that they want to go with in the US, and you don't hear another one. And here it's like you sit there and just recently you talk about him saying, let's inject disinfectant. And then he says, oh, it was a sarcastic comment. And I'm like, if it's a sarcastic comment, why are you making sarcastic comments when there's 55,000 people died in your country because of this thing? And now you're going to sit there and make a joke of it? Like, surely as a leader, you'd be going, okay, it's time to get serious and give the facts and information. But it seems as though he's just completely relying on someone else's, advice, which he doesn't even really know how to portray in a proper way. So, it is frustrating, especially when you got family and friends over there. You kind of worry for as far as their kind of direction of it. And like I said something about it the other day. I just said, look, it's a testament to say, look what we've done, and like look how we've been able to stop this. Flatten the curve. And then you look at the US where it's still going up, and it's like it's a bit of like a reward for effort to see how bad it could have gotten, and that's kind of where the US is at the moment. But then, because we put the proper regulations in place and the proper, laws that restricted people to go out, now we've kind of seen the benefit of the fact that we haven't had as massive of a spike as the US has. So it's frustrating from my perspective to see kind of the lack of, I guess, leadership from his standpoint, where here, yes, the Prime Minister cops quite a bit of criticism from Aussies because that's just part of the culture of just talking
that's an Australian
guy who's at the top, But I think they've done pretty well. Like you look at us in New Zealand, us and ScoMo and Jacinta, and it's like yeah, okay, understand. Maybe he didn't know what bar classes were, and he said barre or whatever it was. And it's a bit of a joke and a piss take. But the overall, thing is we've actually been successful somewhat in flattening this curve, and hopefully, we can come out the other end and save lives because of that, and because of the leadership that was shown in a time that was probably tough to do it. And I think on the other side of the spectrum, you look at him and Donald Trump, and you're like, this guy is literally just gone, I don't really care about other people's lives and stuff. I just want to get this economy going back. And it's like, that's understandable, but there's a certain level of care you have to have for the people that live in your country to look after them. And I think he's probably prioritized one over the other. And it's unfortunate to have to see it from the outside perspective of that. But it's entertaining to see an idiot like that, run the country. But here we are. I'll just got to try to, suck it up and just deal with it until 2020 rolls around and see if we can get someone else in office. It's
been a fascinating time for leaders on all levels. I remember in my mid-20s, I sought counsel from a mentor in Perth, Western Australia. And the question was, what does it take to be a good CEO or a good leader? And his response was, it's about 7 days of the year. When those days present, what you actually do with those days is defining. So it's been fascinating to look at the last 4 or 5 weeks and just see how different leaders have responded. You've had an amazing life journey. I mean, you could. It's going to be a book at some stage. There's no doubt about it, because it's just so unusual in the pathway that you've gone down. What's the biggest learning or the biggest takeaway from it all? If you had to wrap it up in, I know it's difficult, but if you had to wrap it up in 2 or 3 sentences and sort of say, well, this is what I've learned, and you've still got obviously so much of your life in front of you, but what have you learned from it?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I've probably learned is to take risks. I think one of my life kind of mottos is, whenever I'm on my deathbed at hopefully 80 plus, whatever it is, I don't want to sit there and go, I wish I would have done something. I want to sit there and say, holy shit, how amazing has life been that I've been able and fortunate enough to do all these amazing things. And that's just kind of a motto I've looked at whenever it comes to anything, really. It's just to say, okay, is this something that you regret not doing in X amount of years, or is this something that might be a bit more stressful at the time, but it's going to lead to an amazing opportunity and experience. So I think my biggest thing is just taking risks, obviously calculated risks, but sometimes you got to take something that's totally out of left field, that's going to be tough and challenging, and you just got to make it your own and do the best you can to come out on the other end successful. So yeah, it's life's crazy, man. It's a roller coaster. It's there's no way to describe it, and it's been an amazing time for myself. I couldn't fathom half the stuff that I've done, much less. I feel like in the last 6 years, I've done more than 10 lifetimes, and it's been such a cool and amazing journey. I've got nothing bad to say about it. Like, there's been tough times, don't get me wrong, but that just kind of makes the good times even better. And you're never going to have everything. Like, you're always going to have tough times that make you enjoy the better times or the good times. But I think you got to realize that you're never going to have it good forever. You got to be able to deal with some dark days, sometimes where you're going to feel down on yourself, to be able to look back and say, yeah, it was tough at times, but overall, I'd do it all again in a heartbeat.
You might have just given me the answer to the question I was about to ask. Every guest that comes on the show has to complete this sentence. Oh, yeah. Coxie. Life is ...
Life is an adventure. Make the most of it. Enjoy the ups and downs and all arounds, and just be grateful for what you got.
Couldn't have answered it any better. Mason, been great to have you on the show. We're going to watch the rest of your pathway with incredible interest, because it's already been a fascinating one. I'm glad you've become an Australian citizen, because I think you're just so well placed to be a bridge between the two countries and give us great perspective. So congratulations, mate, on a life well lived.
Yeah, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. And we'll look forward to see what the next adventure is.
See you, mate.
See you, buddy.
Please remember, if you're ever in need of support, reach out to Lifeline or Beyond Blue. For more insight sessions, you can find us on all of the social platforms or at lifechanger.org.au. Thanks for joining us, and here's to a life well lived.
I don't think I will ever know.